The Children's Bible, Ezra 1 through Nehemiah 6. The Return to Jerusalem. Now in the first year of Cyrus, king of Persia, so that the word of the Lord might be fulfilled of Jeremiah, the Lord stirred up the spirit of Cyrus, and he made a proclamation throughout all his kingdom, and put it also in writing, saying, Thus says the king of Persia, The Lord God of heaven has charged me to build him a house at Jerusalem, which is in Judah. Who is there among you who are of his people? May his God be with him, and let him go up to Jerusalem to build the house of the Lord of God in Jerusalem. And let each survivor, wherever he is living, be assisted by the men of that place with silver and gold, with goods and beasts, besides freewill offerings for the house of God in Jerusalem. Then rose up the chief of the leaders of Judah and Benjamin, and the priests and the Levites, with all those whose spirits God had raised, to go up to Jerusalem to build there the house of the Lord. And all who were around them filled their hands with vessels of silver and gold, with goods of all sorts, and beasts, and with precious things, and with everything that was willingly offered. And Cyrus the king brought forth the vessels of the house of the Lord, which Nebuchadnezzar had brought out of Jerusalem, and they were brought up from Babylon to Jerusalem. And now 2 years after their arrival, all they that were come out of captivity unto Jerusalem set forward the work on the house of the Lord. But the adversaries of Judah troubled the people in building, and hired counselors against them to stop their progress, all the days of Cyrus king of Persia, even until the reign of Darius the king of Persia. But Darius the king made a decree forbidding any hindrance in the building, and the elders of the Jews built and finished the temple, according to the commandment of Cyrus and Darius, kings of Persia. And the house was finished in the 6th year of the reign of Darius the king. After these things, in the reign of Artaxerxes, king of Persia, there was a royal cupbearer named Nehemiah. One day Nehemiah was in the palace at Shushan, when some men of Judah arrived, headed by his kinsman Hanani. And Nehemiah asked them for news of those Jews who had been taken into captivity, and what had happened to the city of Jerusalem. And they said to him, Those who remain in the province are in pitiful condition. Although the temple is rebuilt, the wall of Jerusalem is broken down, and the gates are burned with fire. When Nehemiah heard this, he wept and mourned for several days, and fasted, praying to God that the sins of his people might be forgiven, and that he might be able to help them. And it came to pass, in the 20th year of Artaxerxes the king, that Nehemiah took up some wine to give it to the king. When he did, he could not conceal his sorrow, but he had never before been sorrowful in the king's presence. So the king said, Why do you look so sad? You are not sick, so you must have some secret sorrow. Nehemiah was frightened, and said, May the king live forever. Why should I not grieve, since my home city, the grave of my ancestors, is laid waste, and its gates consumed with fire? What are you asking for? Said the king. Nehemiah prayed to God, and said to the king, If it pleases the king, and if I have found favor in your sight, I would pray you to send me to Judah, to the city of my forefathers' tombs, that I may rebuild it. Then the king, sitting with the queen by his side, asked, How long will your journey be, and when will you return? Seeing that the king was willing to let him go, Nehemiah set a date for his return, and asked for letters of safe conduct to the governors on the other side of the river, so that they would let him travel through Judah. He asked also for a letter to Asaph, the keeper of the king's forest, allowing him to demand timber to make the beams of the gates and the walls. All of this was granted to him by the king, together with a military escort for the journey. Nehemiah came to the governors on the other side of the river, and gave them the king's letters. When Sanballat the Horonite, and Tobiah the Ammonite, who was his servant, heard that he had come to improve the lot of the children of Israel, they were very angry. But Nehemiah went on to Jerusalem, and rested there for 3 days and nights. One night he arose with a few of his men, and without telling anybody of his intentions, for as yet nobody knew what God meant him to do in Jerusalem, he rode out on a donkey and inspected the city. He went out by the valley gate to the dragon well and the dung gate. and examined the broken walls and burnt-out gates of the city. He passed on to the gate of the fountain and the king's pool, but there was no room for the beast that was under him to pass, so he went on in the darkness beside the brook, and looked at that part of the wall, and then turned back, and went back into the city through the valley gate. The next day Nehemiah went to the priests and rulers, who did not know why he had come, and he said to them, "You see what a sad state Jerusalem is in, and how the gates of the city have been burned by fire. Come, let us build up the wall so that we can hold up our heads again." He told them of how God had spoken to him, and also of the king's words. So they said, "Let us rise up and build." And they began immediately to make their preparations. When Sanballat the Horonite, and Tobiah the Ammonite, and Geshem the Arabian heard what was going on and what was to be done, they jeered at Nehemiah and said, "What are you going to do? Do you propose to rebel against the king?" Nehemiah answered them, saying, "The God of heaven will prosper us, and therefore we his servants are going to build, but you have no share and no rights in Jerusalem." The work was shared out and given to the different families and clans. The high priest and his fellow priests rebuilt and sanctified the sheep gate. The gate of the fountain was repaired by Shallun, the ruler of part of Mizpah. Even women helped in the work of rebuilding. But when Sanballat and Tobiah and the Arabians and the people of Ammon and Ashdod heard that the walls of Jerusalem were being rebuilt and the breaches stopped up, they were very angry. So they plotted to come out and fight against Jerusalem in order to stop the work. When Nehemiah heard of this, he set out a watch for them by night and day. Half of his men labored at the wall, and the other half stood on the alert, armed with spears and shields and bows. Even the builders worked with their swords at their sides. A trumpeter stood by Nehemiah, and he gave his orders to the nobles and to the rulers and to the rest of the people. The work is very widespread, and we are separated from each other on the wall. Therefore, listen for the trumpet, and if it sounds, wherever you may be, run to it. Our God will fight for us. And thus they went on with the work. And Nehemiah told the people, "Every man with his servant is to lodge inside Jerusalem, to guard us by night, as well as working during the day." Neither he, nor his kinsmen, nor his servants, nor the guards which followed him took off their clothes, except to wash during the rebuilding of the wall. And after 52 days, the wall was finished.